Hello everyone and welcome to SwitchUp. In today's video we're going to look at 3 games and review them using our normal system of 5 areas, leading to a score given out of 100, but we're going to do it in a slightly smaller format. This is a series that we started way back in the day. It had 3 episodes before we shelved it, and Mark kind of revisited it, rebooted it last month. The 3 games we're going to look at, almost a belated and completely unintentional Halloween special, are Wallachia, Reign of Dracula, Pumpkin Jack, and Yuppie Psycho Executive Edition. What I'll do is I'll put the links to the first 3 parts of this series in the top pinned comment if you want to see the origins of where this started and why it came about, as well as Mark's newer video from last month in there too if you want to see what those games were. Okay, with all that said, let's get started. Wallachia, Reign of Dracula tells the story of a young woman named Elsin who returns home from hunting to find her mother and father have been slain by Prince Dracula. Her brother is missing, presumed kidnapped by the prince, and she goes on a quest to rescue him. She teams up with a mysterious old man and his pet wolf as they make their way towards the prince's castle. Gameplay wise, Wallachia is a side-scrolling run and gun, and I've seen a lot of comparisons made between it and Contra. I get the comparisons, Contra is a well-known series and this has a similar feel to it, but for me this is closer to games such as Rolling Thunder or Sly Spy in terms of its shooting mechanics and the overall feel, and I'll elaborate a bit more on this in a short while. You move through each stage with an infinite supply of arrows at your disposal, and pressing Y will shoot these off. You can shoot in quick succession and will find yourself doing this a lot. If you want to stand still and aim, then you can hold down L for this, and I found this button choice very comfortable and easily accessible. You have 8-way directional movement in terms of your aim, and this felt nice and responsive. Instead of 1-hit kills, you instead have 4 hit points per life, although you can find additional hit points throughout the stages. You will find a host of power-ups as you play, such as a finite number of stronger arrows or speed and charge upgrades, as well as health refills and extra lives. It's great having to rely on lives and them meaning something rather than having an infinite amount, as is the case a lot of times these days. If you die, you will restart from the beginning of the last screen you progressed to within a level, but if you get a game over, then you will need to start the level again. The levels aren't long, they just feel this way at first due to the difficulty, but after a few tries and some pattern memorization, you can start blitzing through them. As long as you complete a level, you can choose to start from any of the levels you've reached via a stage select option, so you won't have to start from the beginning every time. If you do find a weapon upgrade, you can switch between your available arrows by pressing ZL, and you can charge a shot up and release it by holding down the Y button. You will also collect orbs as you defeat enemies, which will fill your ally meter, and once you have enough orbs, you can send an ally out to perform an assist attack for you, and you can choose between each of your allies and they all have a different attack. You do this by pressing ZR. As well as your bow, you also have a sword, and you can swing this with a press of the X button. Not only can you kill enemies with this, but you can also deflect some of their projectiles, which will get you out of a tight spot if timed correctly. I made the comparison to Rolling Thunder earlier rather than Contra, and my reason for this is that in Wallachia, much like in Rolling Thunder, you have quite a large character sprite, and whilst you have the ability to jump, slide and dodge, it's slower and more deliberate than in something like Contra, where the smaller sprite means you can roll and dodge all over the place. This leads to your character feeling a little awkward to begin with, perhaps a bit stiff, but to be fair, she is actually very responsive to control as long as your expectations are in check. You even have the enemies walking out of doors as you did in Rolling Thunder, although to be fair this game does share the more traditional platforming elements of the Contra series rather than the higher and lower planes that you switched between in the Rolling Thunder games. Each stage ends with a boss battle, and these again are about pattern memorization. They have a decent moveset and put up a tough challenge. The game in general is very challenging but never feels unfair. You can always improve, and I really liked this aspect. Control wise, I've already mentioned that things are responsive, and my only real complaint would be the slide move that you carry out by pressing one of the down diagonal options on the D-pad and then Y. I found myself performing this move accidentally too often when trying to shoot in these directions, and it would have been better had this move been assigned to its own button. In terms of the visuals, a pixel art style is used, which in the context of the arcade style of the game fits perfectly. This looks as if it could have been an SNK or Data East game from back in the day, with lovely chunky sprites and bold backgrounds accentuated by a strong use of colour. From the forest areas to the bridge at sunset and the burning town, everything looks striking. Some parts do look better than others. The quality of the character portraits doesn't quite match those of the character models, strangely enough, and some of the designs just don't quite match the rest of the aesthetic. This first boss, for example, looks quite gaudy and less detailed than everything else around him. Audio goes for loud and bombastic rock rather than an ambient or sinister mood setter, and whilst I think I would have preferred something a bit creepier, I can understand their choice. It gets the blood pumping and again would have been perfectly at home blasting out of an arcade cabinet. Voice acting is included and is of a good standard and enhances the experience. Wallachia Reign of Dracula cost £12.99, $14 or €14.99 or 21 Australian dollars 99, although there is a sale on this game at present in some regions for anywhere between 20 and 40%. There are 7 stages to get through, and whilst the difficulty and the need for rote learning of stages means you won't be completing it straight away, it also doesn't take too long to get good enough to begin to chip away at some of the stages. Whilst it's not massively overpriced, you can buy Sly Spy on the eShop for about £8, the Contra Collection for about £15, and even the Namco Museum game can be picked up cheap physically these days, and that has Rolling Thunder 1 and 2 on it. It's not priced particularly competitively considering it does have a fair bit of competition. There are achievements to go for and a time challenge for each stage, but even so I can't help but feel it's about £5 overpriced. To conclude, Wallachia the Reign of Dracula was a very pleasant surprise. If you have any sort of affinity for run and guns, arcade games or both, then you could do a lot worse. Excluding the current sale price in some regions and just looking at the base price, it is a bit high, but if it is still on sale in your region or goes on sale once again, then there is definitely a lot of fun to be had here. Wallachia Reign of Dracula gets a SwitchUp score of 79%. Next up then we have Pumpkin Jack, and this particular segment was written for us by Brandon Lavender, so thank you very much to you, Brandon. Pumpkin Jack was released just in time for the Halloween season. It's a fun-filled action platformer that sets you on a quest which is both challenging and quite hilarious. Within seconds you gain a feel for the type of journey you are undertaking here. The opening cutscene is quite frankly magnificent. The basic premise is that the devil is bored one day. Yep, that's right, you've bored the devil. Therefore he decides to infest the world with monsters. You are then thrown into this new world as anti-hero Jack, or now Pumpkin Jack due to his reincarnation, to find and destroy the world's protector, the wizard. The storyline doesn't get much deeper than this, but that's okay. There is certainly enough to work with, tied together by a good script full of sarcastic comments and jokes. The game itself then is a 3D platformer harkening back to the days of the mid to late 90s, and Jack himself has quite a few moves. The controls for these are easy enough to pick up and play, and the extra moves that you learn are explained quickly and easily as you travel on your quest. The level designs are varied and keep the gameplay interesting even after a good few hours of playing in one session. Gameplay is smooth, with elements such as the combat having enough variety to make each bout interesting. I did find a few small bugs, such as here where I got stuck where I should have died, but when you consider that this game was made by just a single individual, these are really a small gripe. Although having said that, I would have liked some more thoughts being put into the camera on the more platforming like levels, as you may have a few difficulties judging your distances and angles, the bane of many early 3D platformers, and it would have been nice to have seen this eradicated in a game in this era. Visually, Pumpkin Jack won't stand up to the more AAA titles that we are used to. However, considering this entire game was developed by a single individual, as I said, graphics are rather impressive and perfectly fitting into the art style that the story aims to achieve. Having said that, the game does look much better in docked mode than handheld, and whilst perfectly playable in handheld, I would recommend docked if possible. Audio is on the minimal side, however once again perfectly fitting. Nothing is out of place. The soundtrack supporting the game is conveniently spooky and always leaves you on the edge of your seat. I nearly jumped out of my skin when my girlfriend opened the door behind me whilst I was playing, for example. Aside from the general gameplay, the fully animated cutscenes are spectacular, well narrated and left me in stitches every time. It is a shame though that during the actual gameplay sections all communication is subtitled rather than voice acted. Pumpkin Jack costs £24.99, $29 or €29.99 or 45 Australian dollars. It will take up 2.8GB of your system's storage. Whilst as I said it doesn't have the depth of game design of a AAA game as you would expect, Its game design is incredibly tight, it's a lot of fun to play, and it just exudes humour and charm throughout. If you have any love for that early 3D platforming craze, as I said around the mid to late 90s, then I'm sure this game will make you smile. It could have been about £5 cheaper perhaps, which was its sale price when it first launched, but on the whole I do think it is priced relatively fairly. Pumpkin Jack gets a SwitchUp score of 76%. Yuppie Psycho comes from the same team behind the Count Lucanor, a game that is also on the Switch, and shares quite a few traits with that game, most certainly with the art style, but also the surreal and macabre subject matter, as well as the dark sense of humour that underpins the story. If it were a movie, it would be An American Werewolf in London. It does what it does with an evil smile on its face, but doesn't dilute the scares and set pieces in the process. You play as Brian Pasternak, a young working class man who has just landed his first job at the illustrious Sintracorp. On arrival, things don't seem quite right, and Brian, who is already having doubts due to feeling as if the job offer is an elaborate hoax, is starting to feel quite anxious. He soon discovers that his new job is to rid the office of a creature known only as the Witch, and thus begins the most bizarre first day at a new job ever. Gameplay wise, Yuppie Psycho is a top-down adventure game. You must navigate the various floors of the Sintracorp building, using clues and the details given by non-playable characters to decide which department to visit. As well as navigating the floors, there will be light puzzle solving sections, usually equating to finding a number of visual or written clues and using these to locate an item you need, or inputting something in a particular sequence. You must also make use of other objects you find around the building to assist you in getting past environmental obstacles and barriers. Any items you do find, be it key items or consumables that replenish your health, will be placed in your inventory, and you can use these items from here when the time comes. It feels a little bit like a demastered version of a Resident Evil game, a bit like the one that was on the Game Boy Color, Gaiden I think it was called, in terms of the mechanics it uses. There are various threats around the offices, and if you die there is no autosave feature. In fact, to be able to save the game you must find pieces of ghost paper scattered around the building and then find a photocopier. This copies your soul. Sometimes if the copier is out of toner you will also need to find a cartridge of this, so it would be wise to search every desk, set of drawers and dead body for supplies. This multi-step saving system is another nod to the old Resident Evil game's typewriter and ink ribbon system, and it's definitely quite an old school mechanic, one I'm surprised still exists these days. It will lead to a few instances of having to backtrack as you die before finding your next photocopier, and this will lead to frustration at times. It's not the easiest game out there and the difficulty will annoy you at times, but I must be honest, I did quite enjoy going back to this old school style of playing. As well as the general threats, the game also includes boss encounters, and again these can be quite difficult. They usually take the form of a puzzle in some respects, with you having to work out how to defeat the boss and damage them using things available to you within your surroundings. You will also learn to duck under desks and hide in cabinets to avoid other particularly nasty threats. The general gameplay is a welcome throwback to survival horror. The writing is top notch and it tells a satirical tale of life in the workplace through its outlandish premise. Control wise, everything is easy to use and works well enough, although there are a couple of sections such as this part here where you must lure your colleagues to a particular point where they would become stuck on the scenery, making things more cumbersome than they should have been. As this is the executive edition, I'm led to believe that there are a few new story segments, bosses and possibly a few new endings to find. I say possibly as I've never played the original and finding a definitive answer online proved difficult. It seems as if there may be an alternative route you can take at a certain point which would then see you introduced to that new content. Don't quote me on that, and if you do know more please do stick it in the comments section. In terms of the visuals, Yuppie Psycho uses a simplistic and minimalistic pixel art style. Now I'm a huge horror fan and I'm going to give this game major credit as it's actually one of the creepier games I've played in quite a while. Not scary, I need to make that distinction, but just very under the skin creepy. Don't let the simple aesthetic fool you. Whilst it might not be able to match the Asylum from Outlast for example, it's all about atmosphere, and playing this game in handheld with a pair of headphones with the static noise, the random laughter, the banging of filing cabinets and the buzzing of flies, it's all incredibly unsettling, and to be fair, the graphic nature of some of the imagery, albeit in pixelated form, is also quite disturbing and I really enjoyed it. Away from the general graphics, there are some lovely looking cutscenes, again with a pixel art style but with that anime flavour. On a more negative side though, there were a few instances of stutters during the gameplay, which whilst never detrimental, were definitely disappointing. Yuppie Psycho Executive Edition costs £14.99, $16.66, €16.66 or $24 Australian dollars 90. It will take up 1.3 gigabytes of your system storage. The game will take most people around 8 hours to complete, but the nature of the save system means it could take some people a fair while longer if they get stuck on a particular part. There are multiple endings to find and that new content added, so this will bump up that play time. As well as this, there are some optional collectibles to find as well. To conclude, Yuppie Psycho is a fun game which consists of exploration, puzzle solving and action. Its premise is bizarre and the humour in which it's handled is impressive. It also manages to belie its simplistic art style and deliver some pretty creepy moments. It can be frustrating, you will die and have to redo portions of the game if you don't find a photocopier beforehand, and this might put some people off, but even with this in mind, I couldn't put it down. Yuppie Psycho Executive Edition gets a SwitchUp score of 80%. So there you have it. There are 3 shorter reviews than usual but still using our same system, so hopefully you still get a feel for where games shine and it still gives you enough information to aid you towards a potential purchase. Please do remember to give this video a like if you like what you've just seen. Consider checking out the links in the top pinned comment, including the very early versions of this format and Mark's revival of the series from last month. A quick thank you to our Patreons as always for your continued support, and to each and every one of you for watching our videos. Take care, stay safe, and until next time, happy gaming.
Yeah.